So I logged onto Facebook recently and noticed that this had been shared to me. It's an article over at the Gateway Pundit, which has been shared 17,000 times on Facebook alone. Headlined, an hour after Joe Biden is sworn in, the World Health Organization admits that their testing grossly overstates individuals testing positive for COVID. Surprise, surprise, literally 1 hour after Biden was sworn in, the World Health Organization admitted that PCR testing produces high amplification rates and results in a huge number of false positives. Now, I've seen people arguing about this over on Twitter for months. This doctor here with over 300,000 followers has consistently tweeted about how the way that we do PCR testing is worthless. PCR tests are unreliable due to the amplification threshold. Anything over 17 cycles is worthless. In the USA, we use 35 cycles. The WHO recommends 40 to 45 cycles. Totally worthless. At that many amplifications, you are just picking up the presence of any virus. Useless. So PCR testing, according to this doctor, is just giving out huge numbers of false positives, creating a case-demic rather than a real pandemic. Lots of false positives. But other people disagreed with him, saying that PCR testing was very accurate. And they pointed out that during the summer there was tons of testing, but very few positive results. I didn't know what to believe at first, but now I do. And I really feel that this is too important to just let go. Back at the Gateway Pundit though, and the WHO released a report today saying that their COVID testing overstates the number of false positives. And below that there's another tweet, again detailing the fact that the WHO has admitted high amplification rates result in a huge number of false positives. And if we click on this tweet, well, surprise, surprise again, it looks like Twitter have deleted it. But look, we all know that they are part of the leftist social media and are heavily biased anyway. Now, the Gateway Pundit didn't link to the World Health Organization's report, but I was able to find a screenshot of Andy's tweet on another website. And well done to them for realising that Twitter would have tried to hide the truth again. And we can see here though, Andy has linked to the World Health Organization's report. It looks like the truth is finally coming to light. The WHO has hid the truth about the COVID pandemic from the start. And the Gateway Pundit reported back in March 2020 that the PCR numbers were bogus and grossly overstated the mortality rate of COVID. And they were right. I went to bed and fell asleep thinking it over. The next day I had a look around for more on this subject, and I found this amazing article over at Zero Hedge. Right on cue for Biden, the WHO admits high cycle PCR tests produce COVID false positives. Were the conspiracy theorists just proven right about the fake rescue plan for COVID? Did the science deniers just get confirmation that it was political after all? The short answer to both of these questions regarding the COVID-19 case-demic and the fallacy of asymptomatic PCR testing is yes and yes. Zero Hedge have been detailing America's COVID case-demic and misleading PCR results for the past few months. And this next part gets overly technical, so I won't bother with it. But down a bit and we can see that this has been the plan all along. Essentially, now that Biden is president, somebody at the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the USA, or the FDA, which is the USA's Food and Drug Administration, they will issue new guidance lowering the CT that the labs use. Now remember what Dr. David Samadi said about CT. Anything over 17 cycles is worthless, and the WHO recommended 40 to 45. So now that the WHO has lowered the guidance, the cases will magically start to fall. But in reality, the change is only gonna eliminate all those false positives, but most Americans won't know that. And good old Uncle Joe will be the hero, even though it is deep state actors in the health bureaucracies who won't solve a problem with testing that they have been aware of for months. The article goes on to point out how they were proved correct by the World Health Organization, less than 1 hour after Biden's inauguration. And then down a bit, finally, we get a link to the actual notice from the WHO. And clicking on this takes us right to it. As you can see here, 20th of January 2021. Now this first part here is a bit technical, but again we see below it, literally 1 hour after Biden takes the oath, the WHO admits that PCR testing at high amplification rates alters the predictive value of the tests and results in a huge number of false positives. From Andy Swan. And this amazing article ends with, "None of this was for your health. It was to get rid of Orange Man bad." When I checked over at Twitter, Dr. David Samadi, whom I had recently just started following, confirmed the findings. The World Health Organization has now released guidance to laboratories around the world to reduce the cycle count in PCR tests to get a more accurate representation of COVID cases. The current cycle was much too high and resulting in any particle being declared a positive case. And the last thing that I researched just clinched it for me. Over at the New York Times, of all places, and Biden restores ties with the World Health Organization that were cut by Trump. 20th of January 2021, the very same day of his inauguration. So there you have it. Let me just quickly run through this. When Trump pulled the USA out of the World Health Organization, clearly the WHO would be looking for revenge. And so they went and guided labs to run 40 to 45 cycles, totally worthless, in order to create a COVID case-demic based on false positives. This in turn, of course, led to Trump losing the election, as the left-wing media reported huge death totals that just didn't happen. The very same day Joe was inaugurated, he rejoined the WHO. The WHO then tells labs to run lower PCR cycles, of course meaning that the number of cases will drop dramatically from now on. Just look at these numbers today for all the proof that you need. And after the U-turn was discovered, the leftist social media tried to hide the truth by deleting the tweets. But it was too late. As the Gateway pundit, Reporting the Truth, says, there are so many problems with the reporting, projections and protocol related to COVID. How can these entities ever be trusted again? Do you approve of the Biden-Harris administration? No, I do not. And would you just look at those numbers who agree? This guy Joe Hoftier writing this, he deserves an award. I think I'll follow him on Twitter. Ah, what a surprise. Cancelled. Probably because his posts have been retweeted by President Trump. A guy with 10 degrees banned by Twitter. Dear me. Well, I for one will repay him by buying his new book, In God We Trust, Not in Lying Liberal Lunatics. How could we have been so blind to the obvious truth that was right in front of us all this time? What is wrong with you people who can't see this for what it clearly is? You called me a conspiracy theorist? Well, look at the facts here and tell me how this isn't a clear conspiracy involving the WHO, Twitter, and Joe Biden, the President of the United States of America. So I was on Facebook and this was shared to me. It's an article over at the Gateway Pundit, which has been shared 17,000 times on Facebook alone. An hour after Joe Biden is sworn in, the WHO admits that their testing grossly overstates individuals testing positive for COVID. Surprise, surprise. Literally 1 hour after Biden was sworn in, the World Health Organization admitted that PCR testing produces high amplification rates and results in a huge number of false positives. Now, what have we got below that? Twitter post by somebody called Andy Swan. Let's see, at Andy Swan, 33,000 followers, not too shabby. What does he do though? I guess he must be either a virologist or at least an epidemiologist. Well, let's have a look and see what Google says. And let's click on images. There's a bunch of this similar looking guy here. This looks like maybe this could be him. Let's click on this one at Crunchbase. Right, Andy Swan. I'm looking for a Twitter handle to see if it's him. Now, let's see down here. Yeah, I can see down the bottom, twitter.com/Andy Swan. And clicking on it takes you to his account. And so, Andy Swan, not a virologist or epidemiologist, but he's a co-founder of an investment platform called MyTrade. And he describes himself as a 3-time financial tech entrepreneur and a paragon of entrepreneurial experience. Now, I don't know about you, but I got the feeling from this Gateway Pundit website that this Andy Swan must have been somebody qualified to comment on the WHO's PCR report? But I can't see how a financial entrepreneur is. And why on earth would this website not link to the actual report, and instead link to a Twitter post? Regardless of that, what really matters here is what the WHO said, right? But first, let's have a look at the list of claims against them. The WHO admitted that their testing grossly overstates individuals testing positive for COVID. The World Health Organization admitted that PCR testing produces high amplification rates and results in a huge number of false positives. The conspiracy theorists were proven right that this was a fake rescue plan for COVID, which was all political. Now, staying with Zero Hedge, and I'll skip over this technical part. If you want to know the actual truth about PCR testing, feel free to watch my video on it. I found this part of their article interesting for how they managed to conflate the CDC and the FDA with the WHO. Now, the CDC and the FDA are both American organisations. The WHO is a worldwide organisation, the hint's in the name. But the claim was that some hack at the CDC or FDA will issue new guidance lowering the CT that the labs use, and cases will magically start to fall. And below that part, the article notes that a PCR test instruction document from the CDC that has been revised 5 times as of July the 13th, 2020, specified testing and interpretation of the test using a CT of 40. And again, an update to the CDC instructions for PCR testing from the 1st of December 2020 still uses a CT of 40. So essentially, this some hack at the CDC or FDA issuing new guidance lowering the CT the labs use, and cases will magically start to fall, never happened. Nobody at the CDC or FDA made any change to their testing guidance regarding a drop in CT values. This never happened. And so we finally get to the crux point. What the WHO actually said. The next part of this is so damn sneaky, it is disgusting. They've linked to the notice that the WHO sent out. They've quoted the part where the notice says that weak positives should be carefully interpreted and retested if necessary. And then they added this tweet by this Andy Swan guy, all within the same indentation, making it look like it's all part of the same document. Or at best, that this Andy Swan guy must be some kind of authority on PCR testing? Well, you already know that he isn't, and likely doesn't know a PCR test result from a horse's arse. And Andy's final tweet on this was, "Now they will drop the cycle rates and you can watch the curve go negative, like magic, because the new magic man isn't the bad man, and the masks he ordered worked." The first time I really saw this claim of the WHO admits PCR testing is flawed and CT values should be dropped was actually on Twitter. And you're looking at an archive post right now because the author recently deleted 11,000 of his tweets. But this one also included a link to the WHO's document, which I then clicked on. WHO Information Notice for IVD Users 2020-05. As you can see, it was dated the 20th of January 2021. And this part is pretty valid. Target audience, laboratory professionals and users of IVDs. There's a reason for this. It's because, unlike the vast majority of Twitter experts, including this clown, the target audience for these notices generally understands what is being said in them. To be blunt though, anyone who actually read it would immediately come to the same conclusions. Under description of the problem, the WHO requests users to follow the instructions for use, IFU, when interpreting results for specimens tested using PCR methodology. And users of IVDs, that's the machines that they use for PCR, must read and follow the IFU carefully to determine if manual adjustment of the PCR positivity threshold is recommended by the manufacturer. And so basically, the WHO are telling lab professionals and people using virus detection machines that they should read the manual for the machine. That's all that says. And next up is the part that got the conspiracy theorists' knickers in a twist. WH guidance diagnostic testing for SARS-CoV-2 states that careful interpretation of weak positive results is needed. The cycle threshold, or CT, needed to detect virus is inversely proportional to the patient's viral load. And where test results do not correspond with the clinical presentation, in other words, the symptoms or lack of symptoms that a person might be showing. A new specimen should be taken and retested using the same or different NAT technology. NAT being nucleic acid testing. And so this is the exact same paragraph as this one over at Zero Hedge, minus the part with Andy Swan's tweet. But wait a minute. What were the claims again? The WHO admits their testing grossly overstates individuals testing positive for COVID. Where? The World Health Organization admitted that PCR testing produces high amplification rates and results in a huge number of false positives. Where? Where do you see any admission in this paragraph? It is simply guiding lab people to be careful in interpreting weak positives. And absolutely nowhere does the WHO say that PCR testing produces high amplification rates and results in a huge number of false positives. Nowhere. This entire Gateway Pundit article is an absolute fabrication. Not a single word of this is true. Shared 17,000 times on Facebook. But wait a minute, the conspiracists protest. What about the fact that they changed this just as Biden was inaugurated? You can't tell me that was just a fluke. And look, okay, even if the WHO didn't lower the cycle threshold like we thought that they had, there's no denying that they've changed their guidance right at the time Biden was inaugurated. What are the chances of that? Remember what Zero Hedge said? The conspiracy theorists were proven right that this was a fake rescue plan for COVID, which was just political. And so, to end this video by completely and utterly debunking this bullshit once and for all. When I first saw this paragraph, I read all of it. And then I thought to myself, let's click on this link. Links are great, they take you to more information. And we get to this page. Diagnostic testing for SARS-CoV-2. Now we can see some previous versions here of this document from the 17th of January 2020 and the 19th of March 2020. Now the one from January appears to have been removed. Maybe they remove these every year, I'm not sure. But clicking on this one from March, and that takes us to a download of the actual document from this time. We can see the 19th of March 2020. Let's just download it then. Now, I am going to search for something that is in this notice. The most recent one from the World Health Organization. And what would be a good search term? How about weak positive? As this is really what the accusation revolves around. So I am now going to search this document from the 19th of March for weak positive. Let's see, weak. And instantly we can see they don't even have a weak there. So the phrase weak positive does not exist in this entire document. And so it has to be said, it does appear that the WHO has updated their guidance to encourage more diagnosis in the case of weak positive results. Since March 2020 at least. And yeah, I mean that could be considered somewhat conspiratorial. Because now, for sure, you could end up with less positive results. But this was the March version, very early in the pandemic. And if I just click on this link again, getting back to this page, we can see it was last updated on the 11th of September 2020. And this looks like a document from the 11th of September 2020. Let's download it. And you know what we're searching for? Weak positive. Careful interpretation of weak positive NAAT results is needed, as some of the assays have shown to produce false signals at high CT values. When test results turn out to be invalid or questionable, the patient should be resampled and retested. So basically this paragraph and this one saying the same thing. Telling the lab people to carefully interpret weak positive results. Back in September 2020, when Trump was still the president. Back in September, when cases were pretty much at a low point, the WHO started guiding lab people to check and recheck the weak positives. At a low point, not a high point. And so the last point will cover this weak positive thing and the supposed massive number of false positives that are given out at high CT values. Unfortunately, I can't use the USA data, as I don't have it. However, the UK data will suffice. And trust me, all this WHO PCR admittance nonsense was shared just as heavily in the UK as it was in the US. But what you're looking at here is a tweet from an actual virologist who actually works with PCR. Ian Mackay, and he made this chart based on the data he had. First of all, this is a 3-gene test. In other words, 3 different genes of the SARS-CoV-2 genome were detected in all of these samples. So you can be absolutely confident that what was found was SARS-CoV-2. Some other tests only test for 2 genes, and some even only test for 1. But this was a 3-gene PCR test, which could only bind to the SARS-CoV-2 genome. The mean CT value of the positives was somewhere between 25 and 30. Closer to 25, I would say. Only around 10% of the positives were between 30 and 35 CT. You remember what this idiot said? Anything over 17 cycles is worthless. Had we gone with that, only about 10% of the positive cases would have been discovered at such a low cycle threshold. 10%, meaning that 90% of them, 90% of positive tests would have been missed. This information can be got from the UK's Office of National Statistics. But looking at this then, why does the WHO and the CDC, etc. say that 40 cycles is a good number? Well, I've had a look and I can never see any evidence that the WHO ever said any such thing. They just said read the manual. PCR machines are built to run a specific number of cycles. Here's a list of some of them. And we can see that all except for one have a cutoff below 40 cycles. But let's say that you actually use this GeneXpert one that cuts off at 44 cycles or so. Understand that the machine will run this entire 44 cycles regardless. However, the point at which a sample becomes positive, that's going to remain the same. In the case of this sample 1 here, that would be rated positive at around 21 cycles. In the case of sample 2 here, it only became positive around 42 cycles. This second one here is what the WHO means by weak positive. And all this document says is that these kind of positives should be retested. But they've been saying it from September the 11th, not January the 20th. When people on Twitter start saying stuff like, testing performed at 40 CT is useless, they just don't understand what they're talking about. It's like I said, there's a reason why the WHO lists the target audience in their materials. And so to the very last point of this conspiracy, yes, you might still think it's a little bit weird that the USA rejoined the WHO on Biden's inauguration. But in fact, that was the plan all along. 8th of July 2020, US Democratic challenger Joe Biden has said that he will reverse President Donald Trump's move to withdraw from the World Health Organization on day 1 if he wins November's election. And so there you have it. A conspiracy based on absolutely nothing except a few seemingly related circumstances. And that indeed is all conspiracy. Everything on these 2 websites is a lie. It's a lie designed to keep you clicking, keep you sharing, and keep you throwing money at them. Zero Hedge, 42 million visits per month. The Gateway Pundit, 50 million visits per month. These are not the little guys fighting for your rights that they pretend to be. Conspiracy is a multi-billion-dollar industry today. And you're funding it through Patreon donations, buying books and merchandise from these grifters, or just by simply clicking on the garbage. The conspiracy is real, and it's the conspiracists that are slaves to the conspiracy.